So we've come to our grand finale, and we're very delighted and honored that Dr. Narendra Jadhav, who wears many hats, very difficult to pin him down and say what really his achievements are, and he's got so many. He's a former Rajya Sabha member, an economist, a public policy expert, and I first met him as a member of the Planning Commission. I don't know if you remember that, almost 20 years ago, I think. A professor and an author. And he's very kindly agreed to come, not only as our chief guest, but also distribute the awards to the winners this year. So thank you very much, Professor Jadhav. Let's give him a very, very warm round of applause. I want to talk about, he's also an author, I had mentioned, and I want to talk about a book that is his memoir, actually. It's called Outcast. And the Outcast is spelled not like C-A-S-T, but with C-A-S-T-E, Outcast. And in this, he recounts his experiences of growing up as a Dalit in Nashik and then in Mumbai, and then goes on to highlight the all-pervasive discrimination and the subtle and yet persistent caste system that manifests itself despite the constitutional prohibition against such a thing. So let's begin, Dr. Jadhav, with this word outcast and the fact that you had to grow up in this atmosphere. What is the big change? Since we're talking about drivers of change, what if young Jadhav was here today and not in his village? Firstly, let us talk about young Jadhav in his village. And now if you come here, what is the big change you see that's happened?
Thank you. Thank you, Rajji, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great pleasure as well as an honor to be here to respond to your question, Rajji. Let us start with the word outcast. Outcast is a family biography, autobiography, because it was written collectively and I finally penned it. Outcast is spelled as O-U-T-C-A-S-T-E. There is the E attached to that. That represents a very large segment of Indian society which has been kept for long outside, in the outskirts of the villages where they lived. And for centuries, they had to live life there. But then changes happened. And the main driver of change, we're talking about drivers of change. To my mind, Rajji, the main driver of change is education. Education is the one which makes all the difference. Education is the one which has made the difference from where I was, where I started, and where I am now.
And tell us when you started. Okay. What was the kind of discrimination you faced? What was your ambition at that time? And where have you reached?
I grew up in Mumbai, as a matter of fact, in central Mumbai, a part called Vadala. And my father was completely illiterate. Nobody in several generations before him, nobody had ever gone to school. Nobody. Mine is the first generation. I'm the first generation learner, so to say. So I grew up in Vadala, and my father was a class 4 employee in the Bombay Port Trust Railway. And I grew up in slum-like environment and later on in the chawls created by the Bombay Port Trust. And the atmosphere there was conducive to everything other than studies. But I had my father who made a lot of difference. Let me start with this small story. It's very important. My father had realized the importance of education. He knew that the only way the family can come up is through education. My father was very intelligent. It was just that he did not get an opportunity. I have a PhD from the United States. If he had an opportunity, he would have got 2 or 3 PhDs. But he never got the opportunity. That was the caste system then. So he decided to put his children through a school. And he went to a Marathi school in Mumbai, Chabildas. Many of you might know Chabildas. And he went there and straight away met the headmaster and told him that I want to admit my child to your school. He was obviously going at the wrong time. He did not know the academic cycle. The school opens in June, ends in March or April. So the headmaster was a very nice person. He said, you have come at the wrong time. What you do is, you come back in this month and take the form, fill out the form, and in another month, you will get the admission, and then education will start. My father was not willing to wait. He was desperate. So he started arguing, he started pleading, he started begging, he started crying, and finally he started yelling. And he announced that until you admit my child, I'm not going to leave this room and I'm going to do
Dharna.
fast to death.
Wow.
Right in front of your office. Call the police if you like. But I'm not going to leave this place. And, it went on. Finally, somehow the headmaster relented. He had never seen anything like that. So he said that you go home and come back on Monday with your child and bring sawa akra rupaye. 11 rupees and 4 anna those days. And then my father goes on that day, and then the child was admitted to the school, and my father has written in his own special language that the child was taken to the class, the big teacher sent him to the class, and I also followed. And when I saw my child sitting there in the classroom, that is where the progress of my family began. And that child, mind you, became IAS officer of 1964 batch, and he retired as the municipal commissioner of Mumbai. That was my eldest brother, J.D. Jadhav.
But what was your ambition when you...
The environment in which I was growing, Raji, was conducive to everything other than education. But I had my father. But there, it was literally a jungle Raj. It was a jungle Raj where fighting was the rule. What we call gang wars was the rule. Every day it was going on. And one had to fight to survive. So my first ambition was to become a gangster. Now I find it very strange, and I used to fight very well. Because, you cannot survive in that jungle Raj without standing up and fighting. And you can't take comfort in anything else. You have to just defend yourself. From that situation, I learned a lot from that environment. I learned that you have to stand up and fight it out. Nobody is going to come to your help. That was my first ambition. My second ambition was equally strange. My second ambition was to become a peon. Imagine a peon. Why peon? Now I laugh at it. Why peon? Because there were so many imponderables, so many uncertainties in future that I thought that I must have a job which pays me, which is a permanent job, and it may be paying less, but then it must be a permanent job. See the insecurity which is imbibed into you when you come from that particular kind of community. So that was my second ambition. As I grew up, I learned that it's like stretching yourself. You raise your hand and you touch this place. Then you stretch yourself further. I can reach here. Oh, I can reach here. So you go on discovering yourself, and in that process, you go on building yourself. That is what I did to reach where I am right now.
And therefore my question comes right back is, if young Jadhav lived today, that young boy that was there, how different would the situation be? Has it changed, or are we still facing the discrimination, the kind of issues that you faced to get it? What is the change that has happened to Dalit boys if you look at it.
Okay. Let me say this, that the caste discrimination in the blood form, which prevailed at that time, there was a time not too long ago when it is hard to imagine for younger generation, but all Dalits had to wear, a earthen pot around their neck to prevent their spit from polluting ground.
Wow.
They could not touch anybody. Touching them was a sacrilege. That kind of thing is gone. Untouchability is abolished by law. However, I have to say this, that it still persists in the minds of people. It has become more sophisticated, and in this sophisticated form, it is more pernicious than what it was in the blunt form. So, if I was growing up now, I would not face open discrimination, but I would face a silent discrimination, because that is a part of the mindset of large number of people. And regrettable.
How does that silent discrimination show up? How do you discern that particular discrimination? How do you make it out and say?
Well, it is seen everywhere. When you apply for job, when you are getting admitted to school, everywhere. For example, there was an experiment that in US and something repeated here. Identical biodata were created for a large number of people for a position which was advertised for the namesake. Identical biodata, but one set of biodata had Dalit sounding names and other biodata had general sounding names, non-Dalit names. Can you imagine, with the identical biodata, the proportion of people who were called for the test and interview, it was 3 times larger than those who were with identical biodata, but names which were indicative of their Dalit caste. So
Wow.
that kind of mindset is there, which comes in the way.
In fact, I remember when you were a Rajya Sabha member, you'd actually try to pass a private bill which said that the caste name should not be present in your names that were there. What happened to that, and did it ever move forward, and was it?
Yeah. When I was a member of parliament, I had moved a bill about dropping the surname, because surname is indicative of caste. In India, whether you like it or not, I have to say this, that people, when they meet and they exchange the preliminary conversation, where are you from, what is your name, where are you from, basically they are asking question, what is your caste? Once you know the caste, then you know where to place that person. First of all, the name indicates. Second, common connections or the region one is coming from. All this is indicative of the caste. That is what people want to know. Regrettable, but that is what the reality is. So, that kind of mindset would have to change. I would like to mention here that if you take a long-term view of Indian economy, I'm an economist among other things.
Right.
That's my basic training. Somebody has done a study of a very long-term evolution of Indian economy. Can you imagine, in the year 1, when the Christian calendar began, Gregorian calendar began, year 1, do you know what was India's share in the global GDP? India's share, it is unbelievable, was 33%. Then by year 1500, it had become 25%. By year 1820, it had become even lower. At the time of the First World War, it had come to 8 to 9%. At the time of Second World War, it had come down even further. And it reached the low of only 3% in 1980s. Then came the reforms, 1991, metamorphic economic reforms, which were initiated by Dr. Manmohan Singh, my guru, and that made a lot of difference. So this long curve, which has been precipitously falling, is now going up. Why is it going up now? We are talking about India becoming a superpower. We're talking about Vikasit Bharat. This graph, consistently which has been falling, has been now rising. Today, we are at 8.5% of the world GDP. And China is 19% of the world GDP. Now, this graph is now going up, and we are at between 8 and 9% and rising. China is 19% and falling. Now, this graph change is happening not because the so-called high caste people who controlled and dominated the system, they are taking it up. It is those people who were confined to the outskirts. Now they are joining the mainstream, and they are making this change.
Interesting.
They are making this difference. They are the drivers of change. I am simply one of them. There is a whole generation of young people, boys and girls, who are carving out a place for themselves in different areas, and they are trying to prove themselves. And this is a silent revolution that is taking place. And this silent revolution is really taking that graph upwards. And that's why I think Vikasit Bharat is possible if and only if the growth is inclusive growth. It cannot be growth confined to creating few billionaires. It should be growth which is broad-based, it is all-inclusive. Then alone one can think and talk in terms of Swarnim Bharat.
Excellent. Let's give him a very warm round of applause for that analysis. Thank you. And just coming to a couple of points, we're coming to the end of our conversation. But take a look at one of the things that we talked of was reservations. And that had an impact, as we saw in the 2024 general election, where there was fear among the community that the reservation that they had, what is the percentage around? 18.6% as Dalits in India?
No. Dalits are 15% plus scheduled caste and scheduled tribes together are 27%.
27%. Right, so there was that concern that was there. One of the things is that the argument is that how long would you persist with reservations? Where is there a time now to say, okay, merit should be the only criteria and no more, not just with Dalits, but backward castes and all. And since you are part of the planning commission, I'm not just referring to Dalits, is it time that affirmative action ends and now merit should be the only criteria to get either education institutions or jobs? Where do you stand on that debate?
If merit were the only criteria, which has been the case for a very long time, why did India's economic growth and share in the global economy precipitously fell? Because merit is not a function of the caste into which you are born. The difference between you and me is this: the opportunity. The difference between a touchable and untouchable is the opportunity. Given the opportunity, they can make it. And that is why you need reservation. That is why you need reservation to allow them to get education and prove themselves. And this is in the interest of not only those families, this is in the interest of nation as a whole. You know, I would like to recall a phenomenal speech that Dr. Ambedkar gave on 25th November 1949. That was the last day of submitting the discussion of the Constitution. Next day, the Constitution was approved, and 2 months later, India became republic. His words were very important. He said that we are now entering into a life of contradiction. In politics, we have equality. One person, one vote, one value. However, in economic life, in social life, we have inequality. This is a contradiction. How long, he said, are we going to live this life of contradiction? If we live this life of contradiction for far too long, then those who suffer from this will blow up the very structure of constitution that this constituent assembly has so assiduously built. In other words, political equality is not synonymous. Political democracy cannot survive unless it is supported by social democracy and economic democracy. This is order of the day. So that is why I'm saying that reservation as affirmative action is not only in the interest of those people, it is in the interest of nation as well. We will not be able to sustain our political democracy unless it is supported by social and economic democracy.
And that, I think, brings us to end. Let's give him a very, very warm round of applause. It fits with the theme, drivers of change. We need change, dramatic change, otherwise we'll face the consequences. That's your larger message. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jadhav, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Raji. Thank you all very much.